Hello and welcome to the Famalam podcast. We're talking today about silence and stillness. We've been doing this little mini-series about spiritual formation. If you haven't listened to the previous episodes, it's probably helpful to do that. This is the fourth in our series. Well, fifth if you count the interview that we did with Amanda Neal, which we'll refer back to today. So it'll be helpful if you haven't listened to those for you to pause here and go and listen to them. So we've talked about prayer, we've talked about scripture, we've talked about spiritual formation as a thing in itself. And today we're talking about silence and stillness. Why are you laughing, Lizzy? Why could you possibly be laughing?
Because I just don't think it's something the Robinsons are experts at or even great at. So if anyone has any tips, then please,
Please ring in. You know, on like the game shows when they're like phone a friend.
Maybe
That's what we need on this episode.
We need help.
Yeah. Dad put in the WhatsApp this morning that we were going to do silence and solitude, and I just replied saying that I almost fell asleep in my silence this morning. So I'm trying to bring in this practice, but it's failing rapidly.
In those moments, I like to encourage myself that in the book of Daniel, the Lord put him into a deep sleep where he then had a vision. So that's where I lean into if I ever wake up having tried to do silence and stillness.
Yeah.
I remember being so challenged when I went to upper room. There was a story of this kid who was like really on fire for Jesus. He was so on fire that he'd wake up in the morning at like whatever ridiculous time, like 5 a.m. And because he was so tired and he knew he was going to fall asleep in his bed, he'd go lie down on the cold kitchen floor and make sure he wouldn't fall asleep.
Good man.
I'm there sat in my bed just like dozing off.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can start on the don't do's. Yeah. Don't stay in bed where it's cozy and warm and you're already tired.
Well, I do that.
You sit up though, right? You sit up.
Oh yes, sit up.
So
My cup of tea with Jesus.
Lying down in bed probably isn't a
Finding
great
somewhere
idea.
really special and a place where you can enjoy the presence of Jesus. I think that is really key. And I love my bed in the morning. But I absolutely do love it when you go for a walk on your own, or I love running and I love sometimes not putting what they call pods.
AirPods, Mum.
But sometimes, especially when I was training for the marathon, I would not put them in. Toby's looking at me as if I'm just...
You did a marathon? Really?
Trying to get that in there, Mum?
See, I did a marathon yesterday and I didn't try and get it in.
Can I just say, everyone, Toby did the backwards one.
The London
Reverse.
River.
It got into the podcast.
I don't think you did it backwards, did you? Did you run backwards for 26 miles?
Oh, well, you could say
Anyway.
that. Reverse.
The reverse.
The reverse marathon. Yeah. And how are your legs, Tobe?
They're all right.
I mean, unbelievable. Didn't train. Anyway.
And Daisy did the half.
And Daisy
did do the half.
At about mile 13, I thought, gosh, I could become a marathon runner in the Robinson family. And then I thought, I actually ate a chicken kebab 2 hours ago. I don't think that's wise.
Daisy, that's horrific.
That does sound horrific. When I'm running, I sometimes like not putting anything in my ears. I like just having quiet and time with Jesus. There's a run that I do along the canal, and sometimes you just don't pass anybody for miles, and I just love that run. And when you're on the beach, when you go to the sea and see the ocean, you're just like, oh my goodness, Lord, you're so big. You're so amazing. And I think those moments I can really, really get there and be quiet. Not for long, but I'm working on it.
But there are so many distractions, right? There's our phones, there's TV, there's all the notifications that's coming through. If you've got like a smartwatch or something, you've got all of that too. You've got all the busy schedules. Lucy's not here because she's got an exam at the moment, so she's working hard on her exam, so not here. There's all these things that we try to fit in, which means that we end up being overstimulated. We end up anxious. That's something I've struggled with myself. There's this inability to switch off, and the gift of silence and stillness is to try to help mitigate some of that. And I guess now we've laughed about the fact that we're quite a loud family, but I've really valued learning a bit about silence and stillness, which which we'll get into perhaps in a while. But kids, do you remember doing silence and stillness at all as you were growing up in this household? Like, it's a spiritual discipline. Did you ever use it? Like, what's your memory of being a kid in this house and the practice of silence and stillness?
I definitely didn't. I know that for sure. Yeah, no, I'm probably quite similar to Mum in the fact that as I've gotten older, that the time that I am silent is when I'm running, and that's the easiest place I find it be silent. And I think having something else to do whilst you're being silent, I don't know if that defeats the point, but yeah.
And maybe it's a way into it, beginning to have that practice of stillness. But I was talking about a previous episode in prayer about how I've got like the washing machine going around in my head of all the things that are going on. And perhaps, we'll get into this in a little while of just trying to stop that. I find running really helpful to process and do all of that stuff. Not that I'm a marathon runner, but in my short runs,
one day, everybody, one day.
I enjoy processing. It's really good, but I don't think that's quite the same as being silent. It doesn't silence my soul. It helps me process stuff in a way. But Daisy, do you have any recollections of being a kid and doing silence and stillness or solitude?
No.
No. No. Nice and simple.
Did we encourage it? Did we model it?
No.
Lucy was probably the best at this.
Yes.
If she needed space, she'd go off and have some silent time to herself. And I don't know if it was with the Lord or not. I can't speak on her behalf. But if she needed to come out of a space, she would know when that was.
So it kind of comes more naturally to an introvert than an extrovert.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And to be fair, when I was growing up, as I got into my teenage years, and similar to these guys when I was running, I never really listened to music, but kind of similar to Dad, it was more of a processing space for me. Or I remember over lockdown, but this is much later on, like getting into drawing, not that I'm any good at it, but like using that as a gateway into like being silent and just reflecting. And then now I think I'm only just getting to it now of like being able to sit in bed and like being sat up and having read my Bible and staying in silence. But that's taken like huge intentionality and I'm still very new to it. But yeah, it's not something that comes naturally. And even when I went on a walk today and tried to be silent, and I just started thinking about Ray lyrics in my head, so it wasn't very helpful.
You never know. The Lord might have been using Ray lyrics.
Definitely not. They were like Oscar-winning tears, that song, if anyone knows it.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think the Lord's speaking through that.
I think Daddy and Lucy are definitely more the introverts and get their energy from being on their own. And I think us, Daisy, Toby and myself, I think we're more extrovert. And with Lucy, you're right. She would need to go off on her own as a child and I'd have to create that space for her. And I think that's when she started getting into art and enjoying being creative. And it's just beautiful because she's partnered with Jesus in that. And her paintings reflect that time that she is quiet. But that's a good question. If we're being active, we're running, if we're being creative painting, is that very different to just sitting and
it's silence, but it's not stillness.
Why do we find silence uncomfortable? Why do you think?
Well, I think extroverts find it more uncomfortable than introverts. But go on, Toad. I thought you were going to say something.
No. You go on. Say your point.
That was my point. You're an extrovert. So I don't find silence as uncomfortable as, say, I observe extroverts finding silence.
I think because in my head, I'm thinking I could be doing something proactive and it feels very whatever the opposite of proactive is. Passive. There we go. If I'm sat in bed and just sitting there, I feel like I could be reading my Bible or doing or worship or something. It doesn't feel like I'm gaining huge amounts from it in the same way that I would from reading the Bible. But I think it comes with practicing that and like staying in the silence and stillness to learn that actually you gain just as much, I guess. Probably not even started that journey, to be honest.
I'm still on that journey, Toby, trying to learn.
I mean, I'm an introvert, but I'm also an activist. So I've had to learn that too, that not doing something is okay. And I've learned a little bit about grace through that, because if we're saved by grace through faith, which is a gift from God, then we can do nothing to win or earn our salvation. And yet we fill our time doing all sorts of things, don't we? And we're busy and we feel like, well, we should be worshipping or I should be reading the Bible. Or actually just taking that time to pause and be silent and be still creates that opportunity for us to receive rather than constantly be thinking we've got to do something in God's presence or to stir our souls.
I find it difficult being silent because I start thinking about every other thing in the world. So I sit myself down and I say, oh, I'm going to be silent now. But then I think about the work day, or I've accidentally seen a message from my boss and start thinking about that. Or I think about what I was dreaming about that night. I'm quite a vivid dreamer. So that will come up and I'll be like, whoa, that was weird. But I'll just do a million and one things. But I think silence for me, I'm quite a whimsical person, so I'm very comfortable in silence. I can work all day in silence and go travel in silence. Most of my friends can't really do that.
Mm.
I really appreciate silence. I actually find it really helpful for me and helpful for me to process. But stillness is something I really struggle with. I think there's a big
Okay.
difference between the two of them.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I think I'm very similar. So I quite like silence. Sometimes I just need nothing, no noise. Especially, I remember when the house was really, really busy and I got to walk into the house and there was no one in, and I would just sit in the kitchen and I wouldn't have the radio on, and it would just be me and Jesus. And I would just sit there and tune in and could hear the birds in the yard. Really enjoying the silence, but the stillness, I think some of us Robinsons find quite hard. And I wonder whether that Martha and Mary thing plays into that too.
Oh, yeah.
What's that beautiful song?
Center by Abby
Yeah.
Gamboa.
Oh my goodness.
Good song.
It's beautiful and so challenging. Martha and Mary, I always find really, really challenging, but that stillness, not just the silence, is really, really important. But you've really practiced it.
I have.
You're really good at it.
Yeah, go on, Dad. What do you suggest?
Come on, you tell us.
Well,
How do we do it?
How do we do it? Well, just don't do anything. That's well, I think Amanda Neal had a really great physical action that she encouraged her young people to do when they're trying to develop the practice of silence and stillness. It's kind of allowing those thoughts that you talked about, Daisy. We can notice them, but the difference is you're choosing not to pay attention to them. So she talked about holding out your hand and then moving it to one side. Not that it's not an important thought. It's just I'm not going to attend to it right now. And what I've really enjoyed about that, it's like you park it for a moment and say, that's not an important thing. I'm just not going to think about it now. And back in that episode, I referred to the cloud of unknowing, which is Lizzy's got it right here.
Amazing book. I'm reading it again.
And it is based a lot on what you were talking about, Lizzy, that Martha and Mary chose the better thing to sit at Jesus' feet rather than Martha getting everything done. Well done, Martha. And it's great that she did it, but Mary chose the better thing by not doing anything and just being with Jesus. And so I've tried to learn from that book, The Cloud of Unknowing, which instead of using the analogy of parking it for a moment, we'll put it in the car park or whatever, or using Amanda's analogy of saying pause and putting it to one side, I'll come back to it. It talks about you're entering the cloud of unknowing, a bit like Moses going up Mount Sinai. He entered the thick cloud of darkness to the point that the rest of Israel were like, we think he's probably died. But actually, he was having this great time with God and he was encountering the presence of God and listening to him. And that's the analogy that this author writes about, that we enter that cloud of unknowing. We're never going to fully understand God, but we can have that encounter with him. And it talks about the cloud of forgetting and choosing to let those things be forgotten in that moment. And I've found that so helpful. This is only in the last year or so, but I found that permission to, yes, I need to think about that decision I need to make about work. Or, oh, there's that conversation I have with Lizzy that we need to talk about. Or, oh, yeah, I haven't paid that bill. Those things are important. But the idea of placing it in the cloud of unknowing or parking it or putting it to one side, like Amanda said, has given me real permission to sit then in stillness and solitude and in silence and encounter God's presence. And the idea of contemplative prayer is to use just a simple one-syllable word that your mind can engage in. Instead, your soul can try and connect with God. It was St. Anselm who talked about how God is greater than the highest, best thought that you can ever think. And that's the idea that, well, God is a one-syllable word that illustrates the very best thing you could possibly think. So let your mind use that word, but let your heart and your soul engage with Jesus through the presence and power of the Holy Spirit. And I'm not very good at it, but I've really enjoyed learning how to sit in stillness and in solitude and in silence, and trying to silence my mind as somebody who's battled with anxiety, thoughts running through it a million miles an hour, and always thinking of something else I could be doing or perhaps should be doing. Just the pressure to be able to go, I'm not doing that right now. And parking it and putting it in the cloud of forgetting, whatever analogy you'd like, has been a massive gift to me. And it's something that you can then carry into the rest of the day as well, right? So this is the theory. You spend the rest of the day remembering that you have been still and silent with God, and it creates some deep ballast within your soul that means I'm not going to then have to respond to absolutely every stimulus that comes through, because I've learned how not to do that, because I'm paying attention to God in this moment. And it carries then through. I wouldn't say I'm good at it, but the idea is it carries through into the rest of the days. That's how I've learned. But I don't know, how do you guys try and park a thought so instead you can try and focus on Jesus, or have you not done that? What do you try to do?
I remember someone once praying over me because I like really struggled with stillness and prayer, and she said, put it in a box, because I was getting really stressed about things and anxiety and just like various stuff. And this was when I was at uni. So like now it would be much more helpful, because I feel like I'm just as stressed, or probably more stressed than at uni. There always seems to be more stress the more you get older, you know what I mean? But she just said, park it, like put it in the box and come back to it. Like before you even go into your time with Jesus, list everything that you feel stressed about or anxious or is on your mind, and put that in that box and open it later on. And I've actually never used that advice, but I probably should. So this will be the day that I start.
It's interesting. It's a very proactive thing to do. Instead of waiting for the thoughts to come through, like actively try to think of them, write them down, say, I will come back to them. But that's not what this moment's all about.
I find that helpful, because they're already whirling around. So I see it as like a conveyor belt, like a shopping conveyor belt where it's going straight to God. So I pop it on the conveyor belt and then try really hard to let that be taken away. But it's really interesting. I mean, I've broken my foot, and so I've got enforced stillness. So maybe the Lord is wanting to teach me something there, but it's definitely something that I need to work on. And want to work on. Yeah, I do think some people find it easier than others with I'm not making excuses, but I do think there's some personalities. Like Sally, my friend, she's extraordinary. Like she'll be hours, she'll go away in a caravan and she'll be away with the Lord and be still and silent with the Lord in this caravan for like 8 hours. I just think I just couldn't do that. I'm trying to gear myself up for one of these silent retreats, because I think that would be good for me.
Wow.
Not going on a retreat with someone, but actually going on my own.
Yeah.
And it's enforced silence. I think that would be really good for me. I've been saying this now for like years.
Yeah, but you've never said you think it would be good for you. That's a breakthrough.
I've always known that it's good for me. I just
don't want to do it.
I haven't like put it into place. Anyway, accountability here.
You go like that. It's on the podcast now. Yeah, we'll update you when it happens.
Yeah. Maybe
I'm trying to do that with my broken foot. I'm stuck at home, and I'm trying to have some more stillness and silence.
I'm Martha, basically. That's what she's saying.
He's my butler. It's great.
I think it, for me, like this is sort of thinking about what I can do, because I'm, if I'm honest, I don't think this is something I do hardly enough. Like Jesus, I've been struck at the moment when he goes to his sort of quiet place. He goes to the mountains or something and takes his time there with the Lord. And I think if you can find such a stunning place that's part of God's creation,
that's true,
to sit in silence and in the stillness, I think that would help my brain sometimes, because when you're in those situations, all you can think about is how stunning it is. Those thoughts go to the back of your head. I don't try it enough, but I think where I find it difficult is that I find it really tricky to get those thoughts out of my head. If I can find a space where they're already gone, such as like a stunning view, and just sitting there, and like you were saying, Dad, the contemplative sort of prayers that you're just dwelling on like one singular thing. And I guess being able to dwell on how amazing the creation that the Lord has given us.
Yeah.
I guess that's stillness, isn't it?
Yeah. That's a great idea.
And that's really interesting because we started the podcast talking about the environment we're in, running or the ocean. And I really enjoy the space when I'm waking up in my bed. I like the view from my window and I like the birds tweeting away. And I think there is something about your environment and getting to that place. And I wonder whether, my dad modeled it. I never modelled it. And so I think probably that's why you struggle, maybe. But
no, you say that. The kids, we've talked about cups of tea with Jesus.
So we tried
to encourage starting the day with the Lord with prayer and Bible study.
Yeah.
And that means you're
Silence.
still, and actually you were silent.
Yeah.
So it's not that we didn't try to encourage it. It's just I think that we're learning a lot more about it as well.
I don't know. I'm not sure how it would go down, me enforcing stillness and silence. You as teenagers, I don't think that would go down well. But also as kids, it's quite hard. You guys naturally were quite loud. So we weren't the quietest family. But I do think there is something about creating space in the home, a safe and happy space. And we both tried to really help you guys create your rooms and you creating a safe space in your room, a place that you enjoyed, with your things and you being creative, putting the furniture where you wanted it and stuff.
I'll tell you the other thing that came to my mind when we were planning this episode was when we had the conversation with Mal and Sienna about their Christmas traditions and how they use that moment of like lighting the candles around the Christmas tree to be still. They're not massively silent. They're singing songs and talking about, but it might be worth, if you're interested, listening back to that. I know it's not Christmas, but it kind of sparks some creative ideas about what you could do as a family, lighting a candle and just taking a moment to be quiet. I don't think we ever did that. Did we, guys? No.
And I wonder whether that's something we can together embrace. Maybe that is something we can do together and individually.
I do think silence with other people is much more awkward than silence on your own, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But if you remember, and it was huge, when we were at St Thomas Sheffield 20 so years ago, soaking was something that we really encouraged. And that was about being still and silent. There'd be hundreds of us and we'd just be lying on the floor, just soaking. We'd call them soaking sessions. I remember doing that and enjoying that and getting into that, and I don't know why I stopped. Actually, maybe we should all soak a bit more. I was thinking soaking.
There was a post on Danielle Strickland's Instagram quite recently about that very thing that we would have called soaking.
Yes.
There's psychological evidence that it's really powerful.
I guess it's sort of a type of meditation as well, isn't it? And there's a lot of benefits of that.
Absolutely.
There is. I think the difference between meditation and contemplation, meditation is trying to think deeply about something in particular. Meditating is about having your thoughts focused on something, whereas contemplation is about actively choosing not to try to think too much, but about engaging more emotionally or much more spiritually, I guess, than mentally. So it's trying to give your brain something to do, like I'll think this word God, just allow the longing in my soul to connect with God. And there's different psalms that resonate with both of those things, meditation and contemplation. There's definite similarities within it, yeah.
No, it's good to know the difference, because I think the first hurdle is trying to work out the difference between thinking about scripture and what you're praying about and the stuff that you're struggling with, and then just being still like we're talking about.
Yeah, like they're all good things. There's nothing
of
wrong
course
with meditation at all. It's a brilliant thing to do, but again, it's quite an active thing.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
Choosing to meditate and think about something and resolving things in my brain or on my mind. I'm trying not to be active mentally in this particular space. I'm trying to still my thoughts rather than engage my thoughts. I'm trying to still my body rather than engage my body. I'm choosing to receive grace and enjoy God's presence rather than actively seeking it any other way.
I suppose it's similar to, we were talking, me and Toby, about bodies and how the body remembers, and when you train it, it can do much more than you expect. So for example, this half marathon, I'm not taking my horn with this, but I was able to run a half marathon with not that much training, just because I kind of, let's go. But because I've done it enough times that my body can tap into that muscle memory and that habit, even though it's not a habit that I do often, I'm still in pain, right? It's not like, oh my gosh, I did it and easy. But it's similar to that, or Toby was able to run this marathon without ever training for this marathon because he ran consistently and was building up to it slowly but surely. And I wonder if stillness and silence is similar to that. They say it takes 30 days to create a habit. So if you have small chunks of practice and then when you try and do it fully, you can do it. And it's like the muscle memory of, if I did it now and did like 5 minutes a day for the next month, I wonder if when I try and do 15 minutes, it'd be a lot easier. And then next year, if I try and do half an hour, it's like the muscle memory is just easy.
Which tees me up perfectly, Daisy, for the final thought, because we're thinking, well, okay, we haven't really got a family practice that we did that we can share and go, hey, why don't you do
And
this?
if anyone does have one, then please do share.
Let us know.
We'd love to learn.
hello@famalandpod.com or Instagram @famalandpod. But the suggestion is, for now, if you don't practice any form of silence or stillness, try to take a minute each day, however old you are, however old the kids are. You don't need to try and do it together if that feels super awkward, but just put the phone down, put it in another room. Take 1 minute to not be online. Take 1 minute to be still, to be silent, and just allow your heart to turn towards God and see what happens. And like you said, Daisy, that really was a beginning for me to go, I want to learn a bit more about that.
Whoa. End of the podcast time.
With that, we'll bring it to a close. So we hope that's helpful and we will see you next time. God bless you. Bye.
Bye.